D.Shepherd. In the upper left, he was painted by Gilbert Stewart. As far I want to check, I'm pretty sure. And you want to come up afterwards, but this shows where he was in New Orleans on Bourbon Street. This is a man who was key to his life named Judah Turo, very wealthy benefactor and businessman in New Orleans. Wild Goose, which he was building in 1842. And this is a very important hand drawing that some of you have seen, which is the old Episcopal Church. And during the controversy of who owns the clock, before it became part of McMurran Hall, this is a great drawing showing it in the old Episcopal Church bell tower, which was kind of phase one of the controversy. This is Mary Benninger Mitchell, who was 11 years old, who talked about the state of how McMurran Hall was a hospital in 1862, so it's a later night. This is how it looked after the war. It had no wings. It got wings. This is where D.Shepherd is buried. And this is Mr. T.A. Dennison's, beautifully engraved. I made this. I'm just going to read straight out. Great story. He's a very interesting man. And we will touch on the volatile topic of the clock tower controversy, which brings out the warlike nature in Episcopal Church congregations. But I exaggerate. All right, okay? This is just about as long as Dan's, but it's a great story. Thank you so much, Dan. D.Shepherd, about how a young boy from Shepherdstown built a massive fortune through work, smarts, and an act of his own heroism for another. Behave. Okay. Then turned around and gave much of it back as McMurran Hall, an almshouse in New Orleans, and other gifts, and a town clock, one of a very few surviving and working, an 1842 Graham slow-beat, deadbeat escapement clock. D.Shepherd had a strict, flinty way, but on paper and in the world at large did his huge generosity stand tall, pervade the landscape, and enrich the hearts of humanity. He was born right here on lot number 1 in Shepherdstown on August 1st, 1784. When he was just 9 years old, R.D.'s father, Abraham, placed him in the store and counting house in Baltimore of William Taylor, an ambitious importer and ship owner. R.D.'s incredible gifts surfaced when he, just 18, was sent to New Orleans to assure a good return on a huge shipment of British goods his firm had purchased for New Orleans customers. The firm then realized that with the Louisiana purchase, the Louisiana region would become in due time a state, and that a duty of 2.5 cents would be added to the price of all sugar imports thereafter. So, Shepherd and a business partner, when all the sugar produced in the state was between 21 and 2,200 hogsheads, cornered 1,800 of those hogsheads, giving young R.D. a, quote, handsome capital for a young man to start in the mercantile life, unquote. He soon created a new firm shared with Taylor, then in time, through age and retirement, became R.D.'s alone. Coming into his own, he married Lucy Taylor Gorham of Barnstable, Massachusetts, who sadly died 6 years later. She was a niece and later adopted daughter of Taylor. On August 22nd, 1809, their only child, Ellen Shepherd, was born in Louisiana. It was at this juncture the penchant of R.D. for regular publicity-averse benefactions took root. In the moment of his willed defiance against a direct military order to work instead to save one particular wounded man, left for dead in war. A man who himself would live on to become the epitome of the proverbial good man, albeit extraordinarily wealthy. His name was Judah Turo, a top-hatted but humble Jewish businessman who believed in respect for all religions, daily applications of the Code of Good Works, and he was beloved throughout his circles and region as the, quote, Israelite without guile. While carrying ammunition on the battlefield, January 1, 1815, Mr. Turo was struck by a 12-pound shot, which tore a large mass of flesh from the thigh and prostrated him along with dead and dying. Disregarding what a surgeon said, Shepherd got a cart, put him in it, administered stimulants, and took Turo to his own house. He then procured nurses, and by the closest attention, Mr. Turo's life was saved. Artie's businesses continued to grow exponentially, and his brother James Hervey Shepherd was summoned from Shepherdstown to assist. In 1837, James Hervey Shepherd died, and R.D. returned to run businesses in New Orleans. Now, from 1837 to 1865, R.D.'s nephew, Henry Shepherd Jr., who was brought up in his uncle's counting room, gradually assumed the role as R.D.'s agent in New Orleans. And this enabled R.D. to start migrating back here. Now we're going to set out the clock controversy. We'll simply say this, that the church saw a huge expansion in demand for popularity of its church with the arrival of Reverend C.W. Andrews, this unexpected burgeoning of popularity. And then you had R.D. Shepherd in New Orleans that was having what we call burgeoning wealth. And so somehow this whole story is how those two intersected years later and caused a bit of a stew. Summary of the clock tower episode in Shepherdstown. Its installment, in Shepherdstown, the installment and then all too soon departure of Reverend J.H. Morrison at Trinity Episcopal Church, its first resident minister ever, prompted efforts to make the church, make the much older and existing church on the corner of Church and High Street better and bigger. This is about 1841. Work began to make a $2,210 investment in improvements that included an expanded frontage to undergird a clock tower. When finished in the fall of 1841, there was still no replacement minister to fill the pulpit. But another year passed when came who would become the church's most impactful leader, the Reverend Charles Wesley Andrews. He began drawing many new communicants, and so great was the increase that the vestry ruled that its newly renovated church was actually too small. So they resolved to buy a site and build a new church, a bold plan to cement a bright future for the church that would ultimately cost $10,000 in period monies. But the number of communicants soared to almost 70 by 1845. The vestry now acquired a nice home for a rectory for Reverend Andrews and his family on New Street to assure his stay. And progress on the new church slowed considerably for years. R.D. Shepherd, their best potential source of support, was preoccupied with his businesses in New Orleans, the failing health of his lifelong friend, Judah Turo, and Shepherd's considerable expenses in building his own place, Wild Goose, that was going up on the 468 acres that Shepherd bought north of town. Now, not until those matters were lifted for R.D. in 1855 did he contribute $3,000 to build a new church, an amount 6 times larger than the largest individual donation for the 1840-1842 work on the existing church. Then the work on the new church began picking up speed. Shepherd also proudly produced a magnificent Graham slow beat, deadbeat escapement clock, and that's the one here. that A.T. Denison had originally built for Christ Church in Massachusetts. It would, of course, require skilled and regular maintenance of its very accurate and delicate timekeeping wheels, pendulum, pallets, the parts that create the tick-tock sound, and many, many other synchronized and moving parts. And relations soured between Shepherd and the vestry, possibly, with some discomfiture on the behalf of the vestry on being offered a very fancy clock, but with a large circular plate and with an elaborate engraved script assigning the clock system to an entirely different church. Communications between Shepherd, the vestry, and town council may have been also damaged by Shepherd's absence as he was settling the vast estate of his just deceased friend Turo, and with Shepherd's new awesome responsibilities as the absolute legatee of Turo's huge fortune. Turo wrote in his will, "I hereby appoint and institute him, the said Rezin Davis Shepherd, after payment of my particular legacies and the debts of my succession, the universal legatee of the rest and residue of my estates, movable and immovable." So now, from August 1854 to 1859, R.D.'s getting freed up and has more money, and the clock issue is sort of simmering. So from 1854 to April 59, construction on the new Episcopal Church proceeded briskly to completion. As it advanced, in December 1857, the town council let its underwriting of the work of maintaining the clock lapse, and the nuisance expense that the maintenance represented reverted by default to the vestry for a full year. It was then that the vestry moved the clock from this church to the steeple of the new church, perhaps understandably assuming that ownership came with the fact that they had been paying the skilled clockman to maintain the clock from December 57 and through December 1858, just 5 months before the church's consecration. But that is not how R.D. Shepherd and his agent nephew saw it. Nephew Henry Shepherd quickly hired counsel, sounds like modern days, to sue the church. It is possible that the 1 year of maintenance, or substandard maintenance perhaps, by those hired by the vestry to mind the massive clock, helped to persuade R.D. that the vestry could not be relied upon for its fussy upkeep, and decided to take the clock away, hire his own reliable clockman, give it a proper home in a magnificent Greek revival structure, and as a swan song to his birthplace home site, lot number 1, what we call McMurran Hall. So in the end, the new Trinity Church was finished without the clock in April 1859, and Shepherd had his men digging out lot number 1 2 months later. On November 1860, all was resolved. The church agreed to give the clock to the town for Shepherd's new building, provided the 1 year's expense they carried on the clock were to be reimbursed. A total of $120. Tempest in a teapot. So Shepherd gave the clock system to the town council with the intent of it becoming a clock tower in a new town hall, which by now Shepherd had also decided to build. William Sheets, paid by the town council, did in fact maintain the clock without such maintenance and care, the wheels of which could vary in timekeeping, as Dan said, with varying temperatures of cold and warm weather. In a word, the changes in R.D.'s circumstances changed R.D.'s plans for buildings and clocks, where and for whom and how big. On April 5, 1859, the new Trinity Episcopal Church was consecrated, soon followed by the construction of Shepherd's new town hall, and the editors, the ever-vigilant editors of the Shepherd's Town Register wrote June 11, 1859, "We notice on Tuesday that the workmen were engaged in digging out the foundation for Mr. R.D. Shepherd's town hall to be erected from the elevated square opposite the market house in the center of town. The size of this hall, we understand, is to be 30 feet in front and running back 62 feet. and both square and building are to be intended as a donation to the town for the use and benefit of the public. So, on October 6, 1859, the Mount Nebo Lodge of the Masons gave R.D. the honor of laying the cornerstone to his building to become a Greek revival style with two-story portico and Corinthian flourishes. It was only the width of its temple portico and the depth of 4 bays, and the building's detail was enhanced by acanthus leaves to decorate the column and pilaster capitals. A square plinth set over the pediment supported, this is architecture speak, right? Set over the pediment supported the clock tower with pediments over all 4 clock faces. Who wrote this? In the spring of 1862, when Federal General Banks and his army entered into Jefferson County, R.D. took refuge in Boston with his daughter. As the war progressed, it's Mary Bedington Mitchell, its maw of destruction came closer to Shepherdstown's nearly complete building. 130,000 troops moved in the area in September 1862 for the Bloody Maryland campaign just across the Potomac River. Wounded from the nearby battles poured into Shepherdstown, putting the unfinished town hall into service as an outdoor hospital, and wrote Mary Bedington Mitchell, "The unfinished town hall had stood in naked ugliness for many a long day. Somebody threw a few rough boards across the beams, placed piles of straw over them, and laid down single planks to walk upon, and lo, it was a hospital at once." With war ended, and when he was still healthy, R.D. had urged that his town hall become the county court, since the Charlestown courthouse was a battle-scarred ruin, especially from a shelling it took in the fall of 1863. R.D. Shepherd died of typhoid fever, November 11, 1865, no longer the executor of Turo's estate, leaving no philanthropist to help make up the loss, and wrote the editors of the Times-Picayune in Louisiana. R.D. Shepherd had the largest and most productive estate which has ever been held by one person in this city and state. In his native village, he erected a splendid building designed for a town hall and also a large academy with beautiful grounds and a walk. He also deposited with the mayor annually a large sum to buy fuel and provisions for the poor. He also erected the largest and most costly church in Jefferson County. Rezin Davis Shepherd was buried with his wife in the family burial plot adjacent to the Episcopal Rectory on New Street. Shepherd's Town Hall became the county courthouse, brought about not only for its magnificence and availability, but by the relatively more northern tilting political sentiments of the populace of Shepherdstown when compared to the profoundly Confederate sentiments that still seethe in the Charlestown neighborhood. The first term of the court met in Shepherdstown, June 1866. Wrote the Shepherdstown editor, Shepherdstown Register, June 9, 1865. May a code of laws be administered, appreciated like those of Parmenides, to which the citizens yearly swore voluntary allegiance. May its walls re-echo in vindications of equity and right. Let it forever be a temple of justice. Shepherd University began when the county seat of Jefferson County, West Virginia, was moved from Shepherdstown back to Charlestown in July 1871. On February 27, 1872, the legislature of West Virginia passed the following act: that a branch of the state normal school be and the same is hereby established at the building known as Shepherd College in Shepherdstown in the county of Jefferson. R.D.'s descendant, Shepherd Brooks, assured a normal school on Lot 1 when he deeded the property and building over to the school and a 3-person board of trustees to maintain. And as they say, settings reverse, the tide of life had gone out and came back in again. Thank you.